Here's a quote. I don't know where we can put this. There's a quote in this episode. Dean saying, "Your half-calf double vanilla latte is getting cold over here, Francis." And I'm like, that sounds like the mean gay person.
Hello, and welcome to Super Hell, aka the Mystery Throtcast, a show where two recovering Supernatural fans subject themselves to a rewatch. Thank you so much for bearing with us during our short hiatus. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Ollie. Use any pronouns, and you can find me on social media at OllieFresh. It's fresh with a PH.
And I'm Klaudia. My pronouns are she, her, and you can find me on social media at Klaudia Says, K-A-L-U-D-I-A Says. Today we're going to talk about episodes
6 and 7.
Which are Skin and Hookman.
I have to say, these two episodes I think are formative for me, not just as someone who watched Supernatural in the day, but for some reason, I remember these two episodes so much more than I remember maybe any other episode from season 1 for some reason, and I have no idea why.
I think that these follow the Supernatural formula very much. Like, not only are they, like, very procedural, whatever, but, like, these are, like, establishing the lore. So, like later on when we get to, like, oh, we're gonna do a regular episode, they're very much like this. Like, they're following, like, what is an urban legend or a ghost lore kind of episode, or what's a shapeshifter episode. Like, they're very, like, foundational to, like, what the norm is. So I feel like that's why, like, that's why you would remember it. But I think also, especially the first one has really like foundational imagery.
Yeah.
The thought I had, because it's really disgusting with the skin and stuff. I did remember when I first started watching it, and of course I was a super hulag bitch, and I had watched Doctor Who, whatever, and I remember, like, people doing all the, like, comparisons on Tumblr, and whenever they would take gifs from this episode, and they'd be like, moisturize me.
No, because I knew exactly what you were going to say when you started talking. When you mentioned Doctor Who. No, because this episode, the first one that we're going to get into is called Skin, and I can go ahead and helm this one. This one has a lot to do with nastiness, which is funny because you'd think that Sam and Dean, this is one of, like, a couple episodes, like, this is one of the first real episodes where they're like, oh, this is so gross about things that happen. And I'm like, I feel like you guys have definitely seen worse, but maybe I just have a different perception of what is actually gross than Sam and Dean do. I can't fault them for it. That being said, I feel like they've definitely seen grosser than what happens in this episode.
Well, I mean, they see a lot of, like, blood and dead bodies and whatever, but, like, this is grotesque. This is body horror. Like, this is grotesque in a, like, unnatural way.
Yeah.
One could say supernatural.
I actually wouldn't say that. I think the title is wrong because there's nothing supernatural about this. This is just some good old fashioned body horror.
Yeah. And I like that. I mean, we've talked about that with this earlier of, like, the early seasons being actual horror. And this episode also is the one that actually Hookman does as well. Has a lot of, like, traditional horror references. Like, it really starts out like a slasher of, like, with the woman, like, tied to the chair and whatever. Like, it's very pulpy in a way, but, like, more than just that Supernatural itself is pulpy. But, like,
yeah, no, I get it. This one really, like, digs into that.
Yeah.
Do we want to get started talking about it?
Yeah. Tell me what happens, Ollie.
Sure. So once again, shout out to the Supernatural Wiki. Without you, this show could never happen. The cold open for this episode is a girl tied to a chair, and she's, like, crying and covered in blood, and she's so upset. The police come, and the police are, like, trying to get into this house. They go up, they find the girl, they help get her untied, and she's gesturing. She's like, he's in there, he's in there. So the police, which are all out, decked out in, like, SWAT team armor, they go in and they see a guy, like, about to jump out of a window, and they're like, freeze right there. Turns around. It's Dean Winchester holding a knife. so what happened? Is Dean gonna do something bad? It's crazy.
This established the show as like, and we said this about the pilot of whatever, as like having surprisingly good writing sometimes.
Yeah.
Of like really good cold opens. Like that's like a really good like procedural cold open of being like, what do you mean? And like, because later on it's very much that like that trope of like the callback of like, okay, now we're gonna find out what happened because of that.
Yeah. I love that later in the episode, when it gets into the actual plot, it'll be like, it's like 1 week earlier. So it's showing like what's leading up to this. But I really like knowing what's going to happen. Like I read the last page of a book first because I'm like, I just need to know what vibe I'm bringing into it. So this show starts with Sam and Dean in the car at a gas station, and they're like driving in a direction. And Sam's like going through his emails on his phone, and Dean's like, you still talk to your friends from college? And he's like, yeah, I still have friends from college, Dean. Come on, what am I supposed to do? And he's like, oh, do you lie to them?
Oh, he's like a little BlackBerry.
Yeah, Sam.
Also, he had internet. Like, what is this? 2007, and he had internet on a BlackBerry. Like, Sam, yeah. Material girl.
No, I'm like, who is paying his cellular bill? I'm just curious. But no, so he looks at his phone and he's responding to emails, and he and Dean have this little conversation where Dean's like, you know, it sucks, but in our line of business, you do kind of have to cut people off, which is a shame. And he's like, yeah, I'm sorry, Sammy, but you can't keep your friends around because they don't understand who you are and what you do. And Sam's like, cool, whatever. I just got an email from my friend, Becky, that her brother just got arrested for murdering his girlfriend. Can we please go help her? And Dean's like, that is not anything that we really should be involved in because it's not supernatural. And also, that is so far behind. We are driving in one direction, and we have passed St. Louis, which is where this episode will take place. He's like, we are so far past St. Louis, we cannot go back. And Sam's like, please. And then the next shot is them driving back.
This is a city episode, but they don't have that many city episodes.
Yeah.
This is and I feel like this episode is one of the reasons why there aren't a lot of city episodes, because something always horrible happens to them when they go into a city.
Yeah. This is a particularly bad episode for the boys. They're not having a good time. So they roll up to Sam's friend's house, Becky, and she's like, oh my God, Sam, you're back. And he's like, hey, this is my brother. Can we help you with what's going on with your brother, Zach? And she's like, well, killed his girlfriend, and he tied her to a chair and killed her, basically. But my brother was with me the whole time, so I don't know how that could have happened unless he's in two places at once. And Sam and Dean kind of share a look, and Sam's like, well, my brother Dean is a cop, so maybe we can help. And Dean's like, I'm a detective, actually. And
that was me again. ACAB Dean Winchester rears its head because Dean's like, how fucking dare you call me a cop? Like,
literally,
he got so insulted, and I was like, so
yeah.
true, Dean.
Sam was like, he's a cop, and he was like, actually, I'm a detective. And then there's a part later on where he's like, nope, it'll be fine. I'm an officer of the law. He says it in such a way that you're like, he hates this.
And I was like, because this is right after the Mirrors episode where he like beats up a cop, and I was like,
yeah,
this Dean Winchester back.
Yeah, where is this Dean Winchester? He would have been able to save Cass from super hell. This Dean Winchester would not have fallen down a horrible pipeline. Dean now is like, yeah, I'm a detective. Maybe you could show us where the crime scene is, like what happened. So Becky takes Sam and Dean to the scene of the crime, and they start.
Don't work like that.
No, they literally just open the door and walk in like under the caution tape. And a very notable thing that does happen is there is a dog in the front yard. I guess it's the neighbor's dog. Starts barking at them, and Becky is like, that dog used to be so nice. And Dean's like, well, when did the dog stop being nice? And she's like, about a week ago, right before everything happened. So Dean's like, that's gonna keep that as a handy little tool.
That's weird.
Because Dean's also at this point very much like, this is clearly horrible, but not really our wheelhouse. But after he sees the dog, he's like, hey, Sam, Dogs. That's no good.
Sam has a line, and they have this a couple times later. I like when Supernatural does this, when they're like, we can't really figure out if this is like an us thing, because like most of the time they're like, this is a case, but like when they can't figure out if it's a case, where usually Dean is like, this is not an us thing, and they're like, this is a serial killer, that's not an us thing, and where Sam will be like, we've literally gone on less, like what's the difference? And you're like, actually, that's true. Like,
which is a really funny juxtaposition with the next episode where, and this is a spoiler for the next episode we're about to talk about, where Dean sees something in the paper and he's like, oh, we should go look at this. And Sam's like, but what if it's nothing? And I'm like, pick a struggle, God. Like, what is your issue? But anyway.
They're both so stupid.
No, they are terminally dumb. But so Dean's like, oh yeah, well, the dog the dog might be a thing. Maybe this is our kind of problem, but not really. I'm still skeptical. But they're looking around the house. It's so covered in blood. It's disgusting. But they don't really find any additional clues, except Becky tells them the house was robbed about a week before the murder, and the murderer stole her brother Zach's clothes. Not all of them, but just like some outfits. But the police don't think it's anything.
Even though he only stole clothes and no valuables.
That is a red flag, but
an
maybe
indictment of the police system.
Yeah. The Supernatural really is just, that's, people don't get the genius of Supernatural is that it's a commentary on the police state, but we're not going to talk about that in this episode. But the other thing that she tells them is that there is a video of Zach coming home right before the murder take place. They think the murder took place around 10:30ish. And there's a video of Zach coming home shortly after 10. So that's why the police and the lawyers are like, oh, we need a plea deal. This is what's going to happen. He clearly was there. But she claims that Zach was with her until about midnight. So there's no way that was him unless he's two places at once, which is a really common phrase. And they're like, oh, can we watch the video? And she's like, I actually stole it from my lawyer's desk.
Oh, and she has this line there where she's like, I don't want to say this to a cop, and Dean's like, it's fine.
Yeah. Dean's like, hee, you're so silly. You're an epic girl boss. And she's like, hee. So they're watching this video that they got from Becky. And Sam was like, hey, could you go get us some beers, maybe? She had offered them earlier. So they're like,
her epic girl boss line when he's like, some beers. Also, maybe some sandwiches. And she's like, this isn't a Hooters.
Yeah, and Hooters is Dean like, I wish it was. And I'm like, you are so, if I did not know that this man was
gay.
So gay, this would be so misogynistic, but I know he just has compet. I know it. Like, Eric Kripke told me.
This rewatch is where I'm really gonna have being solidified. Is Dean Winchester bisexual or is he just gay with compet? And I'm kind of leaning towards the last one now.
Yeah, because I'm a huge proponent that he is bi. Like that has always been my interpretation of him. But like the more I watch, the more I'm like, I'm seeing a familiar thread that I have experienced.
Like really, Sam really feels more bi to me.
Oh, I like that. I think both of them are rolling with the LGBT, to quote Cupcake.
Of course.
So they're watching this tape and Sam is like, oh, here. And this is the reason he asked Becky to go get them some drinks or whatever. He's like, watch. They're watching the security tape. He pauses it. There's a moment where Zach, her brother, looks at the camera and his eyes are glowing. Like, how like cats have reflective eyes when you take a picture of them. They look like that. And they're like, that's not normal. Sam's like, this might be kind of our thing, I'm thinking. And Dean's like, well, you're persuading me. Which is what Dean sounds like. He's like, hey guys, it's me, Dean.
Not the family guy-ification of Dean. Dude.
Sam, we need to go. I need to
You're
stop.
done. You're done.
So yeah, the next scene is bonkers. It's actually not that bonkers. It's very par for the course for Supernatural. On the fridge, there's a picture of Becky's brother, Zach. Then we see a scene where Zach, in air quotes, is sitting on a park bench, despite the fact that I believe Zach is in prison at this point. But this guy who looks just like Zach is sitting on a park bench and he watches this gentleman and his supposed wife, perhaps partner, walk out of a building. And they're clearly like, oh, goodbye. I'll see you when you get back from your trip. Give me a call, etc. The guy leaves in the car, and he kind of makes a face as he sees the wife walk back into the building. Then his eyes kind of flash and they turn like bright white for a second, and then they flash back. And then later, we assume is the same gentleman who had looked like Zach, shows up, but he looks like the husband who just left. And he walks in and he does the exact same thing to the wife, where he ties her up in a chair and starts torturing her. But then, plot twist, the actual husband comes home, walks in the door and is like, honey, they canceled my business trip, so I'm home. And he sees blood and he's like, oh my God, Lindsay, where are you? He runs through the house. He sees his wife tied to a chair and he's like, oh my gosh. And she's like, don't hurt me anymore, please. We love violence against women on Supernatural. But then
so bad.
He runs into the other room and sees this guy who looks exactly like him, who then hits him in the head. And then the scene cuts to the next one. But yeah, we are seeing a really common theme, especially in these 2 episodes.
Jesus.
So
yeah, I mean, I'll say this. It's a problem through all of Supernatural, but in early Supernatural especially, they're like, yeah, just like all horror, slasher against women. And you're like, great. In this episode, especially because you're dealing with like the police and like what the police are going to believe, there's this element of like this shapeshifter can get away with this because like partner violence is completely believable. Like the first suspect is always the partner or whatever. And in each one of these cases, when we see with like Sam and Dean or whatever, people are like, I think Dean or whatever like talks to a neighbor or whatever and is like, oh, I used to like wave at that guy every day, but I guess you never know, like whatever. And that's how it is in reality when there is violence against women. So that's why this episode in particular is especially fucked up, I think. What's interesting about this is, like, most of the time when we see a monster in Supernatural, no matter what the fuck it is, they are doing this horrible thing because they need to eat, feed in some way, or because they're, like, a vengeful spirit. They have, like, some unfinished business or whatever. This episode is one of the very few times when it's like, yeah, this person is a quote-unquote monster and that they are a shapeshifter, but as a person, they are just a monster.
They fully created a monster who's like, I just like to kill women and make it look like their partner's committing atrocities against them. It's like, well, that's interesting.
Well,
but
I mean, and I think that maybe was like the point. Like, I feel like especially in the first season or whatever, like they're trying to go through all the tropes, especially of a procedural, on like, what do you do with that? You know, this kind of murder, that kind of murder, a serial killer, a this, a that, or whatever. So like, yeah, I think if you were sitting there and you're like, I'm gonna do a show that has all like the common supernatural beings, what would happen if there was somebody who had this power and they also happen to be a serial killer? Like, it seems like a very common question to want to answer, like when you're trying to establish this world. So I feel like it makes sense, but it is kind of weird.
The next morning, Sam and Dean go to Zach's house to go kind of look for more clues to try to figure out what's going on. And Sam points out, well, in the video they saw, Zach never left. And the police don't think he ever left because he was home when he allegedly called 911 and was like, hey, you guys, someone killed my girlfriend. Which we know was probably the actual Zach who went home and was like, whoa, what happened? So Sam is like, the monster must have left out the back door because the police still think he's there, which did beg the question for me. What time did the actual Zach get home? Because apparently he got home at midnight. Did they not have tape of the actual Zach coming home?
I don't know.
It's not important, but no. It's just something I felt like I needed to bring up. I digress. They saw Zach going into the home on the tape, but they did not see him leaving. So Sam is like, he must have gone through a back exit. So they roll up and they look at the back exit and they find a blood smear in the alley. And he's like, see, I told you something's going on here. And then an ambulance passes and they find out about this other gentleman who has allegedly like, attacked and almost killed his girlfriend or his wife or whatever. And then they have that conversation of like, oh, he was so nice, which I think for the purpose of the story is to be like, this was out of character for this guy. So they realize that it's connected. So they're like, whoa, that's crazy. Looks like we've got a serial killer on our hands, and are like, oh yeah, no, this is definitely our issue. They go behind his apartment. They're like, oh, well, maybe this thing flies because the trail suddenly disappears.
That line from Sam fucking sent me.
Oh, Sam is so basically what happens is they're looking for clues behind the apartment and they're like, there's nothing, the trail just ends. And Sam's like, well, maybe they can fly. Dean, in any of the legends, do shapeshifters fly? And Dean is like, maybe they went underground, dum-dum. Like, what is wrong with you?
But here's the thing. Knowing Dean, he immediately thought they probably went in the sewers because he's a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fan.
Yeah. That's my question. Who do you think is Dean's favorite Ninja Turtle?
You know the Turtles better than I do.
I 100% believe that Dean is a Raphael stan. He's like,
oh my God, I was just going to say Raphael.
He's like, no, here's the thing. He loves Raphael. He thinks he's like, yeah, he's so cool and whatever. Secretly, he really likes Donatello, but he doesn't want to tell anyone that because he's afraid he's going to get made fun of.
Oh,
that's my game theory.
What about Sam?
I think if you're like, Sam, who's your favorite Ninja Turtle? He'd be like, the one with the staff. Like, he does not really know that much. Anyway, they find a manhole cover and they're like, oh, let's go take a look. They go into the sewer. And as they're walking, they find a pile of, episode name drop, skin and blood. And they're like, ew, this is so gross. And Dean's like, well, maybe when the shapeshifter changes, because at this point they have decided that it is a shapeshifter. Maybe when the shapeshifter changes, it actually like sheds its skin, which was just a fun little thing. It doesn't really end up being relevant to the story.
You know what I like though that implied though, because they were like, oh, we know all this stuff from our dad. Like they'll have a conversation being like, and dad always said blah, 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 and it's in the journal, whatever. But then they'll have other conversations where they're like, we don't know shit. The implication here, and yes, we know that John Winchester is a real loner, but then we find out that John Winchester also worked with other hunters at some point. And so the implication here is that John Winchester, like, other hunters work with each other all the time, is that John Winchester was like, let me reinvent the wheel. Basically, he didn't like everybody already knew a bunch of shit about monsters, but John Winchester was like, I'm not gonna talk to anybody or collaborate with anybody, and I'm gonna make my own shit.
He was the real Tim Cook of monster hunting.
You're done. You're done.
That makes that unfortunately, I believe, makes Bobby the Steve Jobs.
No, please.
Okay, I can't get into the Apple-fication.
Wait, quickly, who was Bill Gates?
Ellen. Duh. Okay. Anyway, again, spoilers for Supernatural. But they find the skin and they're like, we must be close to the lair. So they start heading towards the lair and suddenly they get attacked. And then it runs off. And it looks exactly like the guy from who had just tied up his wife, who had like punched in the head, whatever. So they're like, we got to stop him. So they're running after him. They kind of get separated. Dean goes one way, Sam goes the other. They can't find him. So Sam goes back to the car and is like, what do we do? Dean walks up and is like, yeah, I don't know. I couldn't find him. Do you have the keys? And Sam's like, hey, you know what's really funny is when we were down in the sewer, the shapeshifter punched Dean in the arm really hard and his arm was hurt. And also Dean had the keys. Your arm doesn't look super hurt. So I think you might be the shapeshifter. So he pulls a gun on him and is like, you're not my brother. Where's my brother? And then Dean, quote unquote, is like, oh my God, no, don't shoot me. That would be crazy. You shouldn't shoot me because you're not sure. And Sam's like, tell me where my brother is. And then the shapeshifter just totally decks him and knocks him out. I love this scene because Sam was for sure positive that this was not Dean. I have no idea why he did not take the shot. Like, he was positive.
Yeah. Well, I probably because like he wanted, if I know why, because if he doesn't know where Dean actually is, he wants to keep it alive, so it'll lead him to where Dean actually is.
Yeah, I
So
guess that
that's why
makes
he wouldn't
sense.
like point blank take the shot, you know what I mean?
Yeah, because he
But
was asking like, "Where's my brother?" But my other
yeah.
thing too is that like Sam would have no way of knowing if it had taken Dean because they just got separated. Like he doesn't know if it has to like have the person. In fact, he knows it doesn't have to like have the person in custody to be them. It just
Yeah.
it was a bit of a plot hole, but not really. I just thought I'm just a bitch who likes to pick holes in things
Yeah, yeah, why wouldn't he take the shot? Yeah,
because
that doesn't make sense.
because then the episode would have ended at about the 25-minute mark.
And also, Sam is kind of a girl boss, so like
He is.
this was kind of his like girl boss moment. Like he immediately was like, "Oh yeah, can you hand me the keys?" And Sam's like, "Fuck that! I know you're not my brother." And you're like, "Damn, okay." Like no
Yeah.
hesitation. Like they didn't have the whole like, "Are you my brother? Are you not? I don't know." Whatever scene. He was like, that's not my brother." And you're like, so true.
Yeah. It was an iconic moment. But then the shapeshifter does knock Sam out. Sam wakes up. He is tied up. There was a rope absolutely gagging him, tied around his neck. He is not going anywhere. He looks up and he sees, quote unquote, Dean, or the shapeshifter. And the shapeshifter's like, "Oh, you're awake?" And he's like, "Where's my brother?" And he's like, "I am your brother." And he's like, "No, you're not." And then the shapeshifter goes on this kind of tirade about how Sam does not appreciate Dean enough. And he clearly like has Dean's memories. And it has a moment where it kind of like puts its head in its hand and has a little flashback. We don't see the flashback, but it's clearly like accessing Dean's memories. And it's like, oh yeah, like you never appreciate your brother. In fact, he has so much going on in here. He's mad because you got to go to college and have all these friends and all these opportunities. But Dean had to stay home with dad because dad needed somebody and Sam wasn't going to be there. So Dean had to stay home and do all this stuff. I mean, I had to stay home and do all this stuff. It's me, your brother, Dean, but he hates you. I mean, I hate you. And Sam's like, can you just like go? And then the monster's like, or the shapeshifter's like, yeah, actually, your little friend Becky, she was kind of fine. I'm going to go to her house right now.
And Sam's like, "Excuse me? Oh, I'm sorry." And he literally, that was the establishment of the moment where they were like, "Oh, this guy is just like a fucked up misogynist fucking dude."
Yeah, because it is clearly, it is not like, oh, I need to feed or oh, I'm weak. It's like, I'm just gonna go kill your friend for fun.
He's just like a fucked up little guy. That scene was also funny to me because I can't remember if after this any like shapeshifters take Dean's. I mean, we obviously we see doubles of Dean many times after this in the show.
Double D.
You're done. Some macros chitties.
We can't keep bringing up Samacro on this Supernatural podcast.
You mean
No, you need to move on. What were you saying?
Mystery Throtcast.
The Throtcast.
Okay, wait. So the thing that I thought of was like, I don't know if any shapeshifters ever take Dean's shape after this, but if the rule is that they also like they start to take on his memories after season what 1 2 whatever, he's in hell for 40 years. He dies like 850 million times, like all this crazy traumatic shit that like would not normally happen to a human happens. I would love to see like I just kept thinking of like if they did this to like season 12 or 13 14 Dean, it would like instantly psychic damage
The shapeshifter's like, oh look, I'm so excited that I'm gonna take over your brother. And immediately just like has a mental breakdown.
Dean's like defeated again by post-traumatic stress disorder.
Oh my god. So the monster leaves and we see it go to Becky's house. And we did not bring this up earlier because it's not super important to the story. But Becky went to the lawyers and was like, yeah, I went to the crime scene with a detective named Dean Winchester. And apparently they ran his information and could not find a detective named Dean Winchester. So she's a little bit cross with Sam and Dean, which also kind of adds to the idea that Dean is like, you can't be honest with your friends. You can't really have friends outside of this business because they're going to find stuff out like that and you can't explain it. But anyway, the shapeshifter as Dean shows up at Becky's house and is like, hey, I'm really sorry for what happened. Can I come in and apologize and like explain what's going on? So she invites him in. And this fake Dean is then explaining, pretty much tells her like what's actually going on. Like he's like, yeah, there's a shapeshifter that we think is pretended to be your brother. And she's like, that is ridiculous. But what if it is? And he's like, but he goes off and is like, yeah, no, it's really crazy. You know, sometimes people are different. And she's like, oh, what is he, some sort of like genetic freak? And he's like, maybe, you know, shape-shifting is kind of a way of evolution. And maybe someone was born normal and they just felt like a freak and then they had to do this and they're different. It was very much giving Jughead from Riverdale, like, I'm different.
I was like, no, you are not Lady Gaga born this way.
No, it was literally like, yeah, I was maybe like, you know, maybe the shapeshifter just went through something and this is just how it's trying to survive. Basically, a lot like, and then he says, a lot like me pretending as Dean, being like, yeah, I know, I'm really different and I'm just trying to survive.
Like, okay, but here's another thought. Because earlier on in this episode or maybe it's later in the episode, I can't remember what part of the episode, Dean has several conversations with Sam being like, these people are not like you, like they're never like, you know, these are your friends, but they don't know the real you, whatever. And you know, and he's like, you know, you're always gonna have to hide a part of yourself. And this is the part of the episode where whatever gay teen watching went, I'm gonna make this my entire personality. And like this might be the beginning of oh, they accidentally did write gay neuroatypical Dean Winchester and his brother, to be fair. So this part is so funny to me because the shapeshifter is taking on Dean's personality or whatever, and he's taking on his I'm a gay person in the closet.
No, he's literally he is taking on his compet for him, and I think that's very powerful. But no, because
he's like, yeah, it's just like really hard when nobody's like you or whatever, and you're like, man, even the damn shapeshifter.
Yeah, like the shapeshifter is using Dean's memories to be like, I'm different, and you know, no one's like me, and no one gets me. But then this is where
maybe I was born this way.
Oh my god. So the shapeshifter, then after having this conversation, he looks up at Becky, and Becky's like, I think you should leave. And then the shapeshifter like leans in to kiss her, and she's like, what is wrong with you? You are a freak. Like, get out of my house. She gets up and he's like, come on, I'm not leaving. And she's like, okay, I'm calling the police. So she goes to call the police. He attacks her, and like ties her up and everything. And then the SWAT unit that we saw from the beginning of the episode arrives and is like, stop right there. They see Dean. They see his face. He throws a knife at one of the cops, jumps out the window and runs away. So yeah, that is where the beginning of the episode came from.
Oh my god, he also took on Dean Winchester's hatred for cops.
I love, you know what? We're learning more about Dean. This is something I love about Supernatural, is that because they are so intent on writing these characters as like tough guys who don't talk about their emotions, instead of making them look tough, they have just made them look so repressed. So in order to learn about their actual mental state and thoughts about things, we have to do it through a monster who read their thoughts, which is so funny to me.
And that's not the first, it will not be the last time.
Yeah, for sure. Like, it's like, I'm going to force you guys to talk about your feelings by making you look just so repressed. But then we cut to the sewer. Sam is like struggling to get free. And then he hears Dean and he's like, hey, is that Sam or is that the freak? And Sam's like, oh, it's me. Hee hee. So Dean is like finds, I guess, like some sort of sharp piece of detritus and is like cutting himself out.
Oh my god, it's foreshadowing.
No, not the detritus foreshadowing. We can't go there. Dean is trying to free himself with some piece of some sharp object that he found. Sharp object starring Amy Adams.
I literally was gonna be like, oh my god, I love that show on HBO.
Oh my god. You know Dean is an Amy Adams stan.
Yeah, he's gay.
Yeah, of course. I mean, he's a human. Of course he's an Amy Adams stan. Anyway. So
actually, I think that Dean Winchester is obsessed with the movie Enchanted.
I feel like I could see him being like, I don't normally do these chick flicks, but this is great. And Sam's like,
he knows
you only like this because you like Amy Adams.
Or he's like, yeah, I watched this because of Amy Adams, and then he's like singing along. And
he is like, okay. Is that not the most compet thing? And being like, yeah, the hottest actress is Amy Adams. Not that Amy Adams isn't beautiful, but
then he's commenting about Patrick Dempsey the whole time.
He's like, yeah, I just think he's a really cool actor and I respect him a lot. Okay.
He's like, also, he's a lawyer just like you, Sam. And Sam's like,
there is. Okay. Man. Also, here's the thing. He does play like Dr. McDreamy in Grey's Anatomy. Dean does have an actual canonical crush on a male doctor from a television show that we'll get to later in a later episode. So Dean is trying to cut himself out. How many times am I going to have to talk about this? Dean's trying to cut himself out. And Sam is like, we got to go. It's probably already at Becky's place. So they leave the sewer. They get out. And they take to the streets. And they walk past, I guess, like a television store or whatever, you know, that's always conveniently placed, that is playing a news broadcast. And it shows a police sketch that's literally just looks exactly like Dean. And it's like, oh, this guy attacked this girl. He committed like an attempted murder. So they're like, oh, well, at least she didn't get actually murdered. Yeah. So Dean's like, oh my God, they never get my face right. I look so ugly here.
Oh my God.
Sam's like, it looks close enough. Are you kidding me?
Tangled moment.
Oh my God. So they are like, okay, let's go back to that. We don't have any weapons. We don't have anything. We can't like go back to the sewer to try to stop this thing because we don't have any weapons. Like we don't even know where our car is. So Dean's like, well, they probably drove the car to Becky's house. So let's go there. So they go to Becky's house to get the car. They see it. They're like, awesome. So they go to get the car. Then the police show up. So Dean is like, oh, what do we do? And Sam's like, you run. I didn't do anything. They have nothing. They can't hold me. So you run, come back and get the car. And then wait for me to get out. This is very important. Wait for me to get out before you go to the shapeshifter's lair. Literally the next scene after Sam gets like taken in by the cops for questioning is Dean with the Impala being like, you know me, Sam, I just can't wait. And then he goes by himself to the lair. And I'm obsessed with his mind.
I'm smart, but I'm stupid.
I'm
gay, but I'm straight.
He does crop dust at Whole Foods.
He's all three.
He is.
Every part of this episode is also very like stereotypical, like what people do when there's a double or a shapeshifter or whatever, like especially earlier in the episode when they split up or whatever, and you're like, no, don't split the party. That's the main mistake everybody always makes. No.
Yeah, literally. He's like, I don't care. I'm probably gonna get killed. So Dean goes down to the sewer and he finds Becky there. And he's like, oh my God, what are you doing here? And she's like, I don't know. I was walking home and then something beat me over the head and now I'm here. So Dean frees her and he's like, oh no, Sam was going to go meet me at your house. Come on, we got to go. So he gets her out and they then go back to Becky's house. At Becky's house, Sam has gotten free from the cops. So he's chilling. He's like, yeah, I'm waiting for my brother. And he's kind of explaining like what happened. And he's like, yeah, it's all crazy. And she's like, oh my gosh, so true. Anyway. And then she attacks him because she's the shapeshifter. The shapeshifter as Becky knocked Sam out. When Sam wakes up, the shapeshifter now looks like Dean. And I was like, that is a lot.
He has a little fucked up obsession with Dean. And you're like, he really did. He
absorbed the homosexuality.
Yeah, he absorbed the homosexuality.
Yeah. It's a little bit crazy. But the other thing too is we do see a scene earlier in the sewer where the shapeshifter shapeshifts, and it almost appears like
God.
So this happens right after Becky gets attacked, we see the shapeshifter like basically peel its skin off. And in this scene, the shapeshifter has Dean's form. So I think it was a good excuse to get Jensen Ackles shirtless. But it's basically
like Jensen Ackles shirt. Oh my God.
Yeah, it is disgusting, this scene of it just like pulling its skin off. And it looks pretty painful. So it's really funny to me in this scene where, but it appeared as though in that scene that it was something the shapeshifter had to do. Like it had been in the same form for too long, I guess is what it was implying. So then it shapeshifts into Becky, goes to Becky's house, ambushes Sam, and then I guess shapeshifts back into Dean, which is really funny because it seems like a very painful process.
But it was like for the drama.
That is very true. So it is then as Dean, and the two of them, they're throwing hands. They're having a little fighty fight. Then Dean and Becky show up. Dean sees this shapeshifter as him, and he's like, no, I don't think so. And he shoots it.
You're done.
He says,
you're done.
He says, I am canceling you. Take this. So he shoots it, as they had established earlier, in the heart with a silver bullet, which is how you stop shapeshifters, according to Supernatural lore. So they stop the monster. The police, then we have like a little scene of them in the car after everything. So it's like the next day. And Becky's like seeing them off, and she's like, yeah, the police are gonna release Zach because they're blaming this Dean Winchester guy who they found dead at my house. They're blaming him for all of the murders, so everyone is gonna get to go free. Because in this situation, it had the form of Dean when it died.
This is not the first time that Dean has been like wanted by various police departments in the FBI, and then a version of him dies.
It is, yeah.
This is the first time, and then it keeps happening.
Which is funny because as they are driving out of town, they're having this deeper conversation, but Dean is like, man, I'm almost sad I'm gonna miss it. And Sam's like, oh, miss what? And he's like, how many times am I gonna get to go to my own funeral? Which I'm like, my darling, more than you think.
Bestie, I got some news for you.
Yeah, horrible, horrible news.
Horrible news. We all went to your funeral. For the rusty name.
We can't. Spoiler for Supernatural. Also, something that I do have to say is that there was a Lynyrd Skynyrd song in this episode.
God, I forgot about that.
I just wanted to say it. But yeah, overall, this episode was pretty entertaining. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I really wish there was a little bit less violence against women because it was just quite upsetting.
Yeah.
But it does really introduce the theme, like really gets into it, of Dean being jealous, or at least being upset that Sam got to go and have the chance to live his life, whereas Dean had to stay and fight with their dad.
And it also really introduces the theme of like being a hunter is something you have to hide, which gay people really latched onto that one. And they were like, oh, it's a community that has to live in the margins because it's something that they can't that people don't really always understand. And here's the other piece is that when they have like the conversation, it's Sam who usually has to have the conversation, which is usually the conversation like with somebody to be like, hey, did you know that monsters are real? And they have to decide like whether or not like, is this a person who's going to believe that? And you're like, wow, the metaphors for coming out here are a plethora.
Yeah. And it's also so funny because in this case, the monster is the one who tells Becky, but it's also inhabiting Dean Winchester's body. And the way that it talks about it is so much like, I'm different. I have something to hide. And, it's very reminiscent of Emily from Pretty Little Liars. And I don't say that because I've been watching Pretty Little Liars. I say that because it is really like, for those of you who don't know, Emily is gay. And there's a scene of her like telling her friends and telling her family. And it did kind of have that same vibe as like a early 10s, late thousands show being like, I have something that it's hard to talk about.
Well,
Anyway.
and the conversation that he has with Sam is like, you're like, wow, this is like kind of a deep examination of like, you know, like masculinity in the early to late 2000s, and what it means to be in or out of the closet. And this conversation that he's having, you know, with his brother about like, you know, is it worth it to be out or not? And what does that mean or whatever? And like, he's talking about whether or not your friends should know that you murder monsters for a living. But like, there's no, those terms are never in the conversation. They make it so general, and you're like, how have you done this?
Yeah, it's once again a great example of gay and homophobic. Love this show.
Yeah, this is why this is a seminal episode. Episode we're going to talk about is Hookman, which is again kind of like the last episode where it's establishing some basic ghost lore. And in this case, it's not just like a ghost. This is like a common urban legend that like Sam and Dean are like, oh, I guess it is real. And they were like that with Bloody Mary. And so this is kind of perpetuating that, but this is very much like solidifying, okay, there's a vengeful spirit, or there's this spirit is tied to this certain kind of idea, and this is how you kill it, and either you're salting the bones or you're whatever. And it's still a whodunit in that kind of way. Unfortunately, this is also more violence against women.
Yeah, that I don't know, because I mean, there's usually a decent amount of violence against women, but these last two episodes, it's really hitting hard. Yeah. They said, oh my God, wouldn't it be so funny if we treated women like props?
Yeah, it's not good.
Yeah, this one I would say definitely is not as bad as the last one. It's still not good, but like, it's not. You don't see as much like, there's not like torture porn in this one.
Yeah, this one also has like this one also has references to traditional horror. There's a Shining reference in there, I believe.
There is.
I believe there's probably references to other stuff. The summary pitch for this episode is the infamous Hookman, a vengeful spirit who kills his victims with a shiny hook that serves as his hand, terrorizes a small college town in Iowa. So they have gone from St. Louis, Missouri to Iowa. They are trucking.
No, I just want to know, because you know the Impala is a gas guzzler. How much are they spending on gas?
Who is, like, they're like, oh, Dean is a mechanic, whatever. Like, how are they getting the vintage parts? They must be killing it on eBay. Like, Sam and Dean learn that all the victims, oh, well, that's a bit of a spoiler, so we'll get there. So.
Yeah. That is what I love about summaries of TV shows in general, is when they do just like say something, you're like, wow, that literally does spoil the episode.
Yeah. So the episode opens in a sorority house, basically. They're in Theta sorority at Eastern Iowa University. And there's two girls, they're roommates. One, her name is Lori, and she is hold on, let me start that sentence again. Okay. We see two girls, they're roommates. The one roommate is kind of advising the other one about that she's gonna go on a date. And she's like, oh, does this outfit like look really bad? She says, does this look kind of Martha Stewart? And you're like, damn, this is so dated.
Yeah. And her outfit, what's so funny is this is so clearly like made in 2007, because her roommate is like, why don't you try this one? And she gives her this like sheer lace body hugging tank top that has a built-in bra.
Oh, Victoria's Secret.
Yeah, like, with the low rise skirt. Oh,
everything about it is like, damn, the 2000s, man. It's really a throwback. The girl who's going on a date, her name is Lori. And she's gonna go meet her boyfriend, and she's like clearly kind of nervous and whatever.
Yeah. And they were gonna go to as well. They were gonna meet up and then go to a party.
Yeah. So, basically it cuts to they're at this place called 9 Mile Road. They're under a bridge. It's nighttime. Basically they're like by a bridge that's like by like a river.
Yeah, they're like under the bridge, like
Yeah.
clearly a spot that if this place was real, you know, teenagers would probably go to make out or
Yeah,
smoke weed or whatever teens do.
make out point. But hey, at least we're keeping it legal in this episode. They're in college, so
Yeah, they are grown adults. Good for them.
Supernatural is winning over Euphoria. We did it, yo.
No, so Euphoria wishes it was Supernatural.
No, I can't do that.
I love that. Who's the Destiel of Euphoria? I'd love to know.
No.
I've never seen a single episode of it, so
Weird on. Could Zendaya body the role of Jack? Absolutely.
Listen, in my new updated version, Zendaya is playing Sam Winchester.
Not Zendaya.
She could do it. She has the range.
I can't. Okay. So basically this like 4x4 truck pulls up and it's Lori and she's in the car with this guy named Rich. And they start like making out and her phone rings. It's her dad. She doesn't pick it up. They continue to make out. He tries to like get handsy with her and she's like, no thanks. And then he like tries again. She's like, I said no. You're done.
Yeah, and he's like, oh my god, wig. Okay.
And this is kind of a wild scene because she's like, you're done. And then in the middle of this, like, we see a figure in the shadows, like behind the truck or whatever, who then like takes his hook, like scratches it across a road sign with this horrible noise. And they hear the noise and like, so it goes from being like, oh, really uncomfortable situation to being like, what the fuck?
It goes from one uncomfortable situation to a different kind of uncomfortable situation.
Yeah, so they hear the noise and then like Rich stops, violating her consent to go
to be fair,
investigate.
Listen, I gotta say, in terms of Rich, he was being a bit of a sleazebag, but he was not like going to have his way with her regard. Like he was coming on really strong and he was definitely trying to persuade her, but he wasn't like really. It was clear that his intention was not to actually like hurt her, do any, like violate her.
Yeah, no one was intoxicated.
Yeah.
So another win there.
Yeah, another win.
God, the bar is so low.
The bar is in the ground.
Basically, like an invisible force kind of like attacks the car. We see like tires burst. We see like a big scratch across the car. And Lori like locks herself in the car.
Yeah, Rich like jumps out to look around, and then Lori locks herself in.
And she like jumps, like she like locks herself in the car. And she's like starting to scream, and outside the car it's like silent. And she gets out of the car and she looks around and she finds his body hanging upside down from the bridge. And she's like,
by his feet, like he's like not hogtied, but like his feet are. You can't have just one part of your body be hogtied. I think all of your limbs have to be, but his feet are tied up. And he's hanging.
He got out of the car was attacked, and then suddenly she walked out and he's like dead and hanging, and she's like, what the fuck? So basically,
and then we get the scene that says Supernatural.
Yeah, and that's our cold open. And then we cut to Dean and Sam. They're on their quest to find their dad. Sam is using a public phone. The 2000s.
Oh my gosh, he was using a public phone. And you know what's funny? We know he's got a BlackBerry, but he said, no, I'm not making work calls from my personal phone. And I respect that. He's setting work home boundaries.
Yeah. And Dean shows him like a newspaper about like an invisible car attack in Iowa. And they're both like, that's our thing. Let's go. And they show up and they immediately like, they don't even have to decide. They don't even have to think about it where they're like, we're going to pose as frat brothers, which is fucking hilarious because at this point, Dean Winchester is 26 years old.
Yeah, and Sam is also like, he is almost, 22, 23? Like,
he's in law school.
Like, they are both older. And I know that there are some people who are in college who are a little older, and it's kind of hard to tell with people at that age. But what's very funny to me, too, is that they are both wearing, like, these leather jackets and all these layers,
It's
drive
so
up in this
funny.
vintage car and are so clearly not college students. And like they walk up, they're like, we're your fraternity brothers from Ohio. And the guy who's working, like standing outside, is like, okay.
To be fair, they're frat brothers. Actually, that's completely believable. That they'd be like, yeah, fuck it. Like,
yeah, they're like,
oh,
okay.
like
But yeah.
basically, the wild part though is that they don't like go like, oh, like let's go party with them or whatever. They ask for a room in
Yeah,
the
they're
frat
like,
house. They're
he's
like,
like,
we're transfer students. Can we have a room?
yeah, like we need somewhere to stay. It's like you'd think someone would have shot an email over to be like, hey, sending
Yeah,
some little guys over.
and they're given a room with this guy. His name is Murph.
Murph is my new favorite character.
And okay, this is the wildest fucking scene because he is painting his whole body purple for like a football game or whatever. And Dean's like, and he's like, can you guys like help me like paint like my back or whatever? And Dean's like, immediately no. I've seen what I needed to see. And he's like, Sam, I think you're an artist.
He said Sam should do it. He's the artist. And then the entire time, so they're having this conversation where Murph is kind of catching them up to speed on what happened with Rich. But while they're doing it, Sam is painting his back and Dean goes, hey, you missed a spot. And I'm like, what? Okay, I'm so sorry. Why are you looking?
Literally,
why are you looking, Dean?
Dean? Why are you looking?
Is there something you want to share with the class? Anyway.
And basically, so like they ask him about the killing, so they're like, yeah, so like what happened? And they ask him about the killing, and he tells them about Rich, who was with Lori, that he died, and then like the guy's like, yeah, it's like Lori Sorensen. And they're like, well, who is that? And they're like, well, she's the Reverend's daughter. And it's very weird and slut-shamey and
he's clearly like, he's like, yeah, Rich was a good guy and he was with a freshman who's really hot. And they're like, who? And he's like, Lori Sorensen. And they're like, cool, we are not from here, we don't know who the fuck that is.
Dean's like, the fuck?
Dean's like, wow, I don't care anyway. So yeah, it's just very funny.
It's okay, this is the part where I started to go a little crazy.
This next scene is one of my favorite scenes from this entire show, because I will let you explain what happens and then I will say why it is so powerful to me.
So the next scene is they go to the church for Rich's memorial service. And the Reverend, who's Lori's dad, is the one giving the service. And Dean and Sam walk in, they wait, they talk with Lori afterwards, they ask her questions.
Another thing that I think is important to note is that they walked into this memorial service. First of all, they're not wearing anything in particular like that would be nice for a church. They walk into this service and slam the door. Like, it's just a big door, so the door does close very loud. But like, imagine you are at a memorial service for someone you love and some douchebags walk in and slam the door while the Reverend is speaking. The other thing about this scene that is so iconic to me is that no one is dressed properly. Lori is wearing like a skirt.
It's like, they all walked in off the street.
Yeah, she is wearing a skirt and a green sweater vest and like a short sleeve button up underneath. And I'm like, what are you wearing to your boyfriend's memorial service? Your dad is the Reverend. What is going on?
It's very weird. It's like the memorial service like wasn't planned. It's like they had it like same day. It's very weird.
It's the outfits. Like, I don't know if they just forgot, but it's so funny. I was like cracking up during this, like, what is supposed to be a serious.
Yeah, it's very weird. And here's the thing. Any moment with Dean and Sam, I feel like we're going to need to have a segment on this show of every single time that Dean and Sam interact with churches and Christianity before they actually interact with God and angels, makes me feel fucking crazy, because all of it is accidental foreshadowing in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
So I was on an episode of Driver Picks the Podcast where we talked about another episode that's just like this, where they were in a church, and I went fucking crazy about it. In this episode, they're talking about faith. Like anytime they talk about faith, or like this is one of the few times you see like Dean and Sam like pray or like pretend to pray, and then the part of me just goes fucking bonkers crazy bananas.
Oh my god. I just
like
man,
like praying. I'm not a Christian. Dean and Sam praying before he even knows Castiel, the love of his life, and the fact that his son becomes God. Oh, that means a lot to me personally.
Guys, I cannot express to you, the listener, how unlistenable this podcast is going to be when Cass finally shows up. Like, this is not going to be a fun show anymore. We are going to sound like literal maniacs.
And I think us talking about him for like a while beforehand is, for those of you who don't know the show very well, you're gonna get the same vibe that it feels like watching the show, being like, so where is this guy that everybody talks about? And then he goes, and you're like, yeah.
Yeah, and then he's nothing how you agree. The first couple seasons he's in is not at all. Honestly, none of him as a character is how fandom talks about him
like
is
last
so removed.
3 seasons.
Like when he shows up, he is for all intents and purposes an antagonist, but we'll get there. I mean he's not, but he kind of is.
We can't keep talking about I gripped you tight and raised you from perdition. Like we can't keep doing this.
We got to move on. We got to talk about this.
So another part of this, so like they're talking about faith, they're talking about whatever. This part makes me feel crazy. But Sam has a conversation. Lori introduces them to her dad.
Yeah, they walk up to her and they're like, "Oh my God, we're so sorry. What happened?" And she's like, "Well, he died."
Yeah. Sam also, like, a lot of the time Sam is like the people person and he always has to like say something really awkward, whatever. But this time he actually says something that like kind of makes sense. He's like, "Oh, like, I'm really sorry to hear that. Like, I also witnessed something like traumatic and I know how that can really be. So like, I understand what you're going through." And you're like, "Oh, that's very really realistic."
Good job, Sam.
Good job, Sam. You're a real person. Which it is also very funny to watch because it's like, you regularly watch the most horrifying bullshit all the time. Damn. King of acting.
Yeah, Sam, he is giving everything. Where's his Oscar? Not for Jared Padalecki. Where's Sam Winchester's Oscar?
Sam Winchester. And so Lori introduces them to her dad. It's always funny for me. You know what's a funny part of that scene? She introduces Sam to her dad, and I think Sam shakes hands with him, not Dean.
Dean said, "I don't mess with that. I got other shit going on."
Dean said, "Fuck God," and then he did fuck an angel. So.
Oh my God, it's so spoilers.
Then he fucked an angel, and his son was God. So
yeah, he said, "Yeah, you're praying. That's so cute. Me in 10 years is gonna have a lot to say about this." But he doesn't know that yet. He's just a little guy right now.
Yeah. So they ask her more of what happens, and she says. So, of course, they do the whole, like, "Oh, I must have been seeing things and no one believes me," and whatever. Yeah. And Sam is like, "I believe you," whatever. And so...
Because the other thing she says, is that the person who attacked them was invisible. And everyone thinks she's losing it.
Yeah.
And Sam is like, "No, I believe you. You're good. Like, you're fine. Just because it's crazy doesn't mean it's not true. Like, Don't worry. You're valid."
Yeah. And he's like, "No, you're not bonkers." So... This is where Sam and Dean are like, okay, the Hookman legend is like very common. This could probably be it. And they're like, okay, we're going to look at arrest records like all the way back to like 1851. And you're like, Sam and Dean with the archive research, yes. And you see them like, they're in like a college library at this point. This is where a lot of these cases happening in college towns is very good because they have very good records. So they're looking at like arrest records really far back, and like Dean makes like a funny little joke about Sam being like, "So this is what you do all the time in college?" And Sam's like, "Yeah.
Welcome to higher education."
Welcome to higher education.
Which is funny because I wish higher education was just going and sitting in a library and reading interesting source material. I wish that was higher education. I still need to know what Sam's major was. Like, it kills me. I need to know what he did.
Spoilers for the rest of Supernatural. You know how Sam eventually, like, basically becomes a witch?
Yeah. He's doing spells and shit.
Like, he's just doing spells and shit and, like, learning other languages. Like, that man is a classics major.
Yeah, he majored in Minecraft, actually.
You're done.
Sam, oh my God. Sam Winchester's a business major is something that can be so
That's
personal.
Hateful.
It is hateful, but the idea of if this show had come out now, you cannot tell me that Sam Winchester wouldn't be like, if he was real, Sam Winchester would be like, yeah, have you guys seen Joker? That's a lot like me.
We already talked about how he was a tech bro. He's in Palo Alto.
He's into NFTs.
I don't think that he would like cryptocurrency. I don't. Actually, I think that his brother would be like trying to get into crypto and he'd be like, do you know how the blockchain even fucking works? You know how that's a scam, right? And Dean would be like, actually, I heard... No, not... Does Dean Winchester listen to Joe Rogan?
Oh my God, except for the fact that I know for a fact he would.
His internalized homophobia.
Because he watched Fear Factor. He was like, well, he's the guy from Fear Factor. So
he's the guy from Fear, and Sam Winchester's like, terrible news.
Horrible news about the guy from Fear Factor.
And Dean's like, I don't understand.
How could he do this to me? He was the host of Fear Factor.
Dean, I'm so sorry for that slander. Anyways, so they're in the library. Basically he finds a case he finds a case where there's a preacher named Jacob Carnes who lost his hand in an accident. He murdered 13 sex workers in 1862 with a silver hook he wore on the stump of his hand. Supernatural, it's always the slut shaming, the ableism. It's got it all.
This one's got everything. It's got slut shaming, ableism, and violence against women.
New York Times Club has everything.
And to be fair, like in this, it is not framed as like the sex workers were the ones who were like bad people. Like it is framed as though this guy was a religious zealot, but it's still just like, come on, man.
That's kind of Yas and Slay, actually.
It's kind of it's
actually early Supernatural was very like, actually fuck Christianity.
They literally, and then they were like, actually, literally, they took that literally.
Then they were like, actually, no, fuck God. You're like, whoa.
Yeah.
So, and basically, and then you find out that murder happened at 9 Mile Road where Rich was killed. Basically, then it cuts to like you're outside the college and you see Lori arguing with her dad in the car. Basically, he wants her to live at home. She's like, no, I am an adult. I'm over 18. I'm old enough to make my own choices. Dad, I gotta go my own way.
He's like, but what about God? What about everything you've been through? We can't. We gotta immediately, we're done.
No. Basically, because he drove her back to basically the sorority house. And she's like, she immediately gets out. And I'm like, you know what? Go off with your boundaries. She's like, no, I'm an adult. Goodbye. And she like gets out and she like walks into the dorm. She goes to her room. Her roommate's already asleep. And she doesn't want to like disturb her or anything. She gets like ready for bed. She like doesn't turn on the light or anything. I'm like, what a good roommate. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. I'm like, I would be like, hey, get up. I wouldn't, but I don't know why I just lied.
Damn.
It was weird.
Living with Ollie, fucking hell.
Yeah, that's like my cat. She's like, can you please leave me alone? And I'm like, hey, can you wake up?
The Hookman is actually Peach.
No, leave my cat alone. Peach would never. I mean, I was gonna say Peach would never, but I actually don't have proof of that.
So basically we see that Sam and Dean go to 9 Mile Road to like check out under the bridge. They check the crime scene. And they go there, they're like with a shotgun full of rock salt. They're like, we're ready to fuck up some ghosts. And they're like, you know, it's not going to kill the spirit. Like, you need to like salt and burn the bones and all that kind of stuff. But like, it's going to deter him. Like, we need to go investigate. They hear like a rustle in the bushes, whatever.
This scene is everything to me.
But it's not the Hookman. It is a park ranger. It is the cops, and they both do get arrested, and it's very funny. Again, this is like early Supernatural does have like very realistic moments of them being like, "Let me go check this out," and immediately gets arrested. And like, yeah, because you are rustling around a crime scene with a fucking shotgun.
Yeah, an unregistered weapon. Like, that is on you.
You know,
and the next part. The explanation. Okay, wait, that doesn't happen yet. But
so the next morning, Lori wakes up. She's like, oh, what a beautiful and she sees reminiscent of Sam, actually, in all of his visions, and when he found out that his girlfriend was dead. She wakes up to find her roommate dead in bed with a pool of blood. And there's a message on the wall in blood and like carved in the wall that's like, aren't you glad you didn't turn on the light? And underneath is like a symbol that's like made up of crosses and stuff, which is basically implies that like the roommate was dead the whole time. She just didn't notice because the light wasn't on or whatever. And like, it's very fucked up.
Yeah.
She's like, hello?
Yeah. So she has a bit of a moment where she's just screaming, and I don't blame her. I would probably have just dropped out of school and moved away at that point.
Like, the fuck?
This was actually genuinely like, I remember watching this the first time because for some reason this episode lives with such a clarity in my mind. I remember genuinely being very scared by this. Like, this was a jump scare.
Yeah, this is like a genuinely scary episode. Like,
yeah.
We go back to the police station and Dean...
I love this. I'm obsessed with this.
This is another moment of like Dean's white man privilege that like we talked about a couple episodes ago, where he's like had a whole story ready that's like completely plausible because he is like a young white dude, where he's like, yeah, I just told the sheriff that like Sam was like just like a dumbass pledge and that we were hazing him. And the sheriff believed the story and he let us go. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly what would happen.
But what's even so much better is the fact, too, is that so Dean and Sam are walking out and Dean's like, yeah, I just told him you were a pledge. And Sam's like, well, then why did I have a shotgun full of rock salt? And he said, I told him that we made you go hunt ghosts and rock salt deterred ghosts. So he literally did just like tell the truth because that is exactly what they were doing.
That's exactly like the kind of stupid shit he would do.
No, it's so funny. And they're like, and Sam's like, oh, well, okay, Wig, like, great. Happy also, that worked.
Imagine the pledge in your fraternity is 7 foot tall Jared.
Yeah, who's clearly like in his mid-20s already. And you're like, I never got into Greek life when I was in college, but all of the people that I know who were, I mean, maybe by virtue of the fact that this was about 10 years before I was in college, but this is like,
it's very funny.
No one that I knew looked like it was even had the, not even just looked like, the attitude, the vibe. No way.
Yeah. And so basically, like, they're walking out of the police station and suddenly all these cops come, like, running out of the police station and, like, towards them at first. And they're like, wait, what the fuck? And then, like, you see them, like, all get in their cars and, like, speed off somewhere. And they're all like, oh, what the fuck just happened? And Sam and Dean follow them to the crime scene. And they see that, like, Lori's there. The cops are there. Somehow, clearly, she's involved once again. There's this again a commentary on the police system once again, moment where she's like in the back of the ambulance or whatever, and clearly she's connected to like all these murders or whatever, and the preacher, her dad, is there, and he's like, so are you gonna hold, like, if you're gonna arrest her, like, are you gonna do that, or like, can I take her home or whatever? And they're like, fine, whatever. And it's like clearly like, oh, like we're like buddy. And so like, fine, I'll just like let her go home with you or whatever. And you're like, damn,
yeah,
white privilege is a hell of a bitch.
Yeah. And I mean, like, to be fair, it kind of does give the vibe that this is not necessarily a small town. Like, it's a college town.
Yeah.
But listen, I will say the Reverend is kind of a boy boss in this moment because he is like, okay, if you're going to arrest my daughter, just do it right now. And if you're not, I am taking her home. And I'm like, okay, you know what, boy boss.
Yeah, like, at first you're like, oh, she's sitting there because, like, she's with the paramedics or whatever, and then they're like, oh, she's being kept there, and you're like, wait, huh? There's a lot to unpack about the police involvement in Supernatural episodes. So, like, they reluctantly basically let her dad take her home, and then Sam and Dean, literally mid all of this happening, decide, yeah, while the police are here and everyone else, we're going to climb through a window and check the crime scene. We're not going to just like wait until they leave or something like that. No, we're going to check the crime scene right now.
And we need to address the elephant in the room, which is maybe one of Dean Winchester's worst moments.
Really, most compact moment there is.
There is. So these sorority girls have just lost one of their sorority sisters and are all clearly upset. Lori's outside crying on the porch. Like, it's so not good. And they're sneaking into the house and Dean goes, "Oh, sorority sisters, maybe we'll see a naked pillow fight." And I'm like,
I wish Sam had thrown him off.
No, he should have just, they were climbing like up a trellis when he said this. I wish Sam had just reached back and just kicked him in the head, because that's what I wanted to do. And I was like, if I was not operating under the assumption that he was suffering from the worst case of compet ever, I would have had to stop watching, because this man is so not.
This is also another
so
instance
sexist
where like this show will swing widely from like, these are just like fun little guys that are like fun to hang out with and like sometimes have little deep moments to like, yeah, I'm a macho dude who says wildly misogynistic bullshit, and like it depends on the writer, and the pendulum swings so far back and forth that it's always like whiplash. And that's just the experience of watching this show.
And that's like, I think something else too is that this is the question that I have is like, who is the target audience for this show? Because
they never figured it out.
That's the thing, is that there are so many times where it's kind of implied like Dean's this macho man who thinks nerds are stupid, but then he will make a reference to Star Trek. And I'm like, I know that like Star Trek was not like Star Trek is not like a cool thing to like for a regular person. Like a macho man, at least the stereotype of a macho man, is not making like a reference to Star Trek, but Dean does. And I'm like, what is the like? And I understand, like, obviously that is not representative of real life. There's plenty of people who do whatever, but this is a character and everything they establish about him is a choice. So I'm like, who are they trying to convince? Because I'm so confused as to if they are trying to make him a big macho man or if they are trying to make him like a silly little nerdy guy. It's so weird. And it's not a situation of like, oh, we're learning things and maybe he's not as macho as he seems. It's not that situation at all. Like, it's not an intentional,
it's always
like
by accident.
It is. It's not like, oh, he's pulling back the layers. It's like, oh, he's interesting character choice. I mean, I just wonder, like, who are they trying to appeal to?
There's a lot of like cishet guys like that, obviously, who are like, yeah, I'm like a macho man, whatever, and I'm like, but you like comic books, you're a nerd. And he's like, well, I'm not, but like, you watch anime, like you have opinions about Dragon Ball, like and you're like, but like I'm like that's Dean Winchester. He's like, I'm not a nerd, but like he will fight you about in Teenage Mutant. And that's a thing that's brought up a bunch of times. Shout out to the Scooby Natural episode.
I can't with that. We can't talk about that.
We can't keep doing this.
Not now. I'm not strong enough.
Yeah, so that horribly misogynistic moment that I will personally consider not canon. Hashtag not my Dean Winchester.
Yeah, that is it's not him. I don't know.
In my heart, also like those kind of moments, also Jensen Ackles also kind of like plays like a joke a little bit, which just furthers the thing of like everyone watching it being like, is this compulsory heterosexuality?
He was saying it to be funny. He's saying it in an ironic way.
Yeah, he's saying it to be ironic and funny. Like, is it more of a joke of like, oh, well, like, we're gonna see that whatever, which is like dark humor, because like obviously we're not, because everyone's like outside and mourning, like whatever.
Yeah, their friend who just got fucking obliterated, like,
you know. Anyways, hashtag not my Dean Winchester.
Yeah, that is not my son. I don't know who that is. I feel like the mom in season 1 of Stranger Things, where she's like, that is not my son. No. That is me with Dean Winchester. No. Whenever he says something that's like upsettingly misogynistic.
Like, that's
like, I didn't raise him to be this way.
I did not raise Dean Winchester to be this way. So basically, they go and they check the crime scene. Then from like the smell, I forget the whole smell thing.
So Dean Sam and Dean are both like, oh, this is definitely our area because I've never smelled ozone this strong. So they do make reference to the ozone smell.
So yeah, when it's a ghost, it's ozone. When it's a demon, it's sulfur. Just for future reference.
Are those different smells?
Yeah. Sulfur smells like rotten eggs.
What is it? I guess, okay, I know what ozone smells like. That's a real, that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, never mind. I just learned something. Thank you.
Yeah. Then there's a symbol painted on the wall. They say it's a spirit, and they're like, classic Hookman. And you're like, what does that mean?
I'm like, can you please explain? But then, to be fair, they do pull up like a printed picture of this dude's hook. And it did have like the exact same symbol with the crosses. It had like that as like a keychain on this dude's hook. But also, so like it makes sense that he's like, oh, this is clearly connected. But saying this is classic Hookman when they believed Hookman was like an urban legend and not connected to this specific guy until recently. Yeah, it's just very funny, like a classic Hookman.
They did the same thing with Bloody Mary, and you're like, huh? Like,
yeah, it's so funny. I
love inconsistencies. They go outside and they're like, okay, we're definitely dealing with this guy, Jacob Carnes. They're like, we need to find the body, we need to salt it, we need to burn it. Sam is like, terrible news. He was buried in a unmarked grave. And Dean's like, fuck. Like, here's the wild part about this next scene. So the next scene is them going to a party. Dean makes some little comments being like, oh, like, you know, I didn't know college was this great. And Sam being like, yeah, I was like studying most of the time. I didn't really go to this. But they wait until they're at the party for Sam to be like, so let me tell you this thing I found. Like when they're standing in the middle of a party.
Honestly, here's the other thing too. I don't even know why they went to the party. Like there was not really a reason. So they just go to a party. And like, I believe Lori is there, but they're not like, like there's nothing for them to do. I
think the implication is that they're trying to like track Lori and make sure she's okay. Like they're following her, not to be creepy, but they're following her.
Yeah.
You know, outside the context of what we know and that they're trying to hunt a monster, they're stalking this woman.
And you know what? Iconic.
Yeah, you know,
boy boss behavior.
Boy boss behavior. Truly, this show would have such a different context if these were women. So basically, in the middle of this fucking party, Sam is like, yeah, I don't really go to parties in college. And Dean's like, clearly. And Sam's like, but anyway, here are these articles that I found from 1932 and 1967. They were both priests who were blamed for murders involving a sharp weapon. And Dean's like, okay. And Sam's like, what's the connection, love? What's the connection?
What's up with this, then?
What's the pattern? And he's like, yeah, it's a man of God. It's a clergyman, just like Lori's dad. And so they're like, okay. So they think that Lori's dad is summoning the Hookman, or the Hookman is latched onto his repressed emotions and is feeding off of them. Like at one point they say, and like, oh, it's a moment of them being kind of smart, where they're like, oh, it doesn't have to be him like actually summoning the spirit. It could be like accidental. Like it could be
like it might be like manifestation as opposed to an actual like, oh, he is asking for this creature to go and harm people.
It's very funny you talked about repressed emotions at the beginning of this episode.
That's a theme.
That's literally what
that is
being appears because they're the repressed emotions of a fucked up little religious man.
Yeah, I love that. I think that should happen to Dean.
I mean, it kind of does.
That is true. That's a spoiler for another day.
There is a man who does show up because of his fucked up little repressed emotions and grips him tight and raises him from perdition.
Oh my god.
This part is very funny. So basically they're like, okay, we're going to split up. Dean is like, I am going to go try and find this guy's grave, which is very funny to me because they're like, I'm going to go try and find his unmarked grave. And you're like, how?
Yeah. And you're like, oh, this is going to take so long. And then So Dean is like, oh,
finds a patch of grass.
Literally, maybe it's just because it doesn't show us like him trying a couple graves. It cuts to Dean in like already digging up this grave.
And how does he know it's that guy? Like, how does he know?
Because I don't know.
A boy boss.
He's a boy boss. But
you know what? To be fair, he does have the plot armor, spoilers, of being God's chosen fucking little guy as the main character. Like, literally.
Yeah, he is the main character, and I respect that he is using that to his advantage. The other thing, too, that he makes, as he is digging up the grave, he makes, once again, a horrible comment where he says, as he's digging, he says, next time I get to watch the cute girl's house. Like, in reference, like, oh, Sam is going to have to do this next time. And then he hits the coffin and is like, wig. It's so funny. I'm like,
I'm sorry. Dean Winchester saying wig is...
Dean Winchester will say something so misogynistic and then be like, oh my God, wig.
So he goes to the unmarked grave, and Sam goes to stalk Lori. And
icon behavior.
Yeah. Sam is just basically watching her house from outside. Again, creepy. He sees her arguing with her dad through the window. We're lip reading, apparently. And then the light goes out, and Lori walks out and joins Sam. And he was like, yeah, I was watching you because I was worried about you. And you're like, yeah. From anyone else that was not a fairly attractive man, that would be very creepy.
It's she even comments, like, she walks outside and is like, hey, what are you doing in front of my house? And he's like, I was just waiting to like, sorry, I would just wanted to check on you. And she's like, well, I've already called the cops. Ha, just kidding. And I'm like, no, you shouldn't. You should call the like, girly, you need to call someone.
Like,
I'm not an advocate for calling the police in any situation, but like,
you should not be alone. Yeah, so they're like having this conversation. She's like, I already called the police. And you're like, and meanwhile, Dean is like salting and burning the bones. And he's like, goodbye, preacher. And he always kind of does that whenever he salt and burns the bones. He like throws his lighter, and you're like, so do you get the lighter later? Or like, he always throws it, you know what I mean?
Oh, he throws the lighter, and I'm like, why don't you just get a box of matches at this point, my love? Like, I feel like that would be so much easier.
Because it's about the style, you know? It's not very Yasin slay.
I mean, yeah, but lighting a match is pretty Yasin slay.
I know.
He's just cringe and fail.
So they're outside Lori's house, and Lori tells Sam, like, basically, she's like, yeah, I found out that my dad is having an affair with a married woman in his congregation, and I'm very upset. What the fuck? And he's a hypocrite because he, like, is always telling people that they're sinners, and he's going against God. Like, that's what he raised me to believe, and then he's doing this bullshit. And, like, I see this woman, like, come to church and with her family all the time. Like, this is crazy. And, like, when we were, like, kind of reading their lips or whatever, we see her dad being like, oh, well, you know, she's divorcing her husband anyway, whatever. And, like, the daughter's like, you are a hypocrite. What the fuck? And she, I mean, you know what? She's kind of a girl boss because
she's absolutely a girl boss.
She's making moves. She's like, there's a lot of things happening to me and everything kind of sucks. And she's like, and then she's like, damn, this shit really sucks.
Yeah, and she's
hugs Sam and then makes a move on him. And I'm
she
like,
does.
Hey, girl boss.
And she also, an important thing to note at this point too, is that she also is like, my dad raised me to know that like people who do bad things will get punished. And he's not going to get punished for this. And then she makes a move on Sam. And I'm like, that's a really weird like conversation beat. Like being like, my dad always told me that sinners get punished. Do you want to kiss?
You know what? That's very evangelical Christian, you know?
That is true.
It's very like it's and after like they like kiss for like 2 seconds and then Sam is like and he's like, I cannot do this. My girlfriend did just die in a passion. They have a little conversation, which again also makes me very sad. She's like, oh, is it the person that you lost? And he's like, yeah. This is a moment that when you watch it, knowing what you know, what we know now, hits in a different way. Because she's like, yeah, sometimes I feel cursed and like everybody around me is, you know, going away from me, whatever. And he's like, yeah, I feel like that too. And at first you're like, oh, haha, the funny little joke about how all of Sam's girlfriends die. But then you go, oh, and then his brother dies.
Oh my God, spoilers.
For real. I mean, Dean dies like 50 times, but then he dies for real.
So hateful.
And I was like, oh, this is making me a little emotional. Shit. Because that is what happens is like where he's like, he's left alone. And you're like, oh no. Oh shit. I was like, something in me went back to when Supernatural ended. And I had a visceral rage of like, Sam was left alone again. And I had to watch it at the beginning of the show and I had to watch it at the end. Like, it all came back. Like, oh, the rage. So Lori's dad basically comes out of the house. He calls her in. And
Yeah, he's like, girly, what are you doing? There's some guy here.
She's like, fuck you, dad. I can do what I want. I'm an adult. And then like immediately the Hookman like comes up behind her dad in the door and like puts the hook like into his shoulder and like drags him back, like kind of like vaudeville with the
hook. Oh,
it's kind of like when they play off stage with the and he drags him into the house. And then Sam is like, oh shit, I forgot that's why I'm here. And he grabs his shotgun and he stops the Hookman from killing Lori's dad. And like, he shoots him with the rock salt and the Hookman vanishes. So they're at the hospital. Lori's dad is like, you know, in the hospital bed or whatever. And Sam is like telling the sheriff what happened. He's like, there was this guy. He's like basically being honest. He's like, there was this guy. He like came out of nowhere. He stabbed him, whatever. Dean shows up and he's like, can you please let me go talk to my brother? And they're like, sure. And Sam's like, why didn't you burn the bones? And Dean's like, I did. And they're like, why is he still around? And so this is another like foundational kind of moment, I think, of like, okay, if you've burned the bones and they're still around, that means they're attached to something else. It's a common trope.
Sam is like, oh my God, okay, you burned his whole body. And he's like, yeah, I did. Dean is like, I did. Like, I don't know. And Sam's like, did you get the hook? And Dean's like, fuck, I did not get the hook. That's so funny. It wasn't in there. So then they are like,
how did he know it was him without the hook there?
I have been plagued by that. I have no idea.
Literally, there's so many plot holes here. So he's like, oh shit, I didn't get the hook. And then they're like, okay, shit. And then they're like, and then that's at the same time that Sam goes, I think the Hookman also did not latch on to her dad. He latched on to her because she said that all this stuff about how, like, she said all this stuff about like people being punished when they do something bad. And so it was like, you know, the other guy like pushing her boundaries and then him being punished, or like her roommate like trying to like push her into being a party girl. And
yeah, she's trying
punished.
she's does not want to be yassified.
No, not yassified. And then like her dad finding out that her dad is a cheater, and Dean is like, remind me not to piss this girl off. And that is one of Dean's gayer moments when he's like, girl boss.
Dean, listen, there's one thing that I can say about Dean Winchester. It's that he does make a lot of misogynistic comments, but he also knows girl bosses.
He does respect a girl boss. So basically they go back to the library and they're like, okay, we're going to research prison records and we're going to find that goddamn hook. And they find out that the hook was sent back to the church when he was executed. And obviously it's Lori's dad's church. And Sam's like, okay, that is the reason why all these preachers have been involved with this. They're like, where the fuck would they keep a bloody hook in this church? And they're like, huh?
So, but luckily in the records, it does say like that it was donated, but it was reconstituted. So, or it was reclaimed. So they were like, they melted it down and made it something else.
They're like, fuck, now we have to go into the church and find every single piece of silver and throw it into the fire. Which is also like, how do you burn silver?
I have a major question. Here's my question. So they are like, we need to find this and burn it. If it was reconstituted, they already burned the hook down and made it into something else. Like, it's already been destroyed. So maybe like that is my question, is I'm like, what makes them burning it and melting, spoiler for later in the episode, what makes them melting what this became different from it being melted and made into something else?
Supernatural, answer my questions quickly.
Eric Kripke, call me. I have a lot of questions for you.
Yeah, so basically they show up at the church and they're like, all right, split up. You go in the house, you go in the church. Find everything that's silver, whatever. They're like, let's rob this bitch.
Yeah, they go, because here's the thing. Lori and her dad live at the house that's attached to the church because that's how a lot of places are. But Lori's still at the hospital. So they're like, awesome, we can go into the house, but we'll just have to break in.
Yeah, and Dean starts this huge fucking fire in the like downstairs church furnace. And then they hear this like noise upstairs and they're like, fuck. And then they go upstairs and they find out that it's Lori. She's like in the pews and she's like starting to cry, whatever. And Dean's like, this is a lot for me. I can't handle this. And he like goes back downstairs just to keep burning shit. And Sam goes to talk to her. And basically Lori blames herself. And she's like, clearly I must have done this. This has to be my fault, whatever. And Sam's like, it's not your fault, clearly. In the middle of this, like, the Hookman appears and then tries to kill her.
Well, Lori does. Like, she has a moment where she's like, this is my fault. Like, I wanted them to get hurt, but I should be the one getting hurt. And as soon as she said that, I was like, oh, girly, you've said the bad word.
You're like, uh-oh. And so, like, they fucking book it, and Sam is trying to protect her, and he gets fucking jabbed through the arm with the hook. And then Dean saves him and and shoots the Hookman with the salt, and he vanishes. And they're like, okay, there's still some fucking silver that still exists. And they're like, where the fuck else could it be? And Sam is like, where did you get that necklace? Because she's wearing this necklace, and she's like, my dad gave it to me. And he's like, where did he get it? She's like, oh, it's a church heirloom. And he's like, give it to me. Give it to me now.
She has the necklace. And there is this very funny part where Sam grabs the necklace and like pulls it off of her, like rips the chain, looks at Dean, throws the necklace to Dean at the same time that Dean throws the shotgun to him. And I'm like, so powerful. They practiced that move. Then Dean runs downstairs back to the furnace to go burn the necklace, and Sam posts up with the shotgun ready to fight when the Hookman comes back.
You're like, I love their little coordinated little moves.
I know. I'm like, you guys are just like, sometimes I remember that they are just two little guys.
They're little boy. The best times that you remember that they are just two little guys is especially in the later episodes when they're fighting some like godlike fucking character and they're just getting the shit beat out of them, and they're just getting like thrown across the room, whatever, and they're literally just like these two little guys.
Yeah, they are literally just two guys, and I love them.
Of course, it's like last minute kind of deal, and then the cross like melts in the furnace, and then the Hookman vanishes.
So what is also, sorry, I hate to interrupt. What's also so funny is that the Hookman, while they are waiting for the necklace to burn, Dean has thrown it in, and he's like standing there waiting for it to burn. Sam and Lori are upstairs. The Hookman attacks. Sam tries to shoot it with the gun. It punches it out of the way. And then they are both just cowering in the corner. And I'm like, wow, Sam, that was so ineffective. Dean would never.
They always have so many questions. They always make such questionable choices.
But I digress then.
Yeah. So it's the end of the episode. At this point, like, we can notice some patterns, which are like, they've saved the girl who was in a bad situation, and now it's the end of the episode where we're outside with the paramedics and we're gonna wrap things up by the car. Like, this is your typical end of the episode. And Sam is like, he's getting his arm tended to by the paramedics, which is like, that was a pretty fucked up like injury. I don't think that's like just a little patch up from the paramedics.
No, he got messed up. Like, that hook got put into his bicep.
Where's his tetanus shot?
No.
Oh my god, he needs a tetanus shot just like Dean with the rusty nail.
I like the idea of him getting a tetanus shot. They're like, okay, do you have your medical records? And he's like, I don't have medical records. And they're like, do you have a tetanus shot? And he's like, I don't know. POV, you are the doctor who administers Sam Winchester's tetanus shot.
Oh, that's the thing. Dean never got a tetanus shot, and that's why he dies.
That is so true. No, actually, you're probably right. Do you think John Winchester was taking him to the pediatrician? No.
I think John Winchester is an anti-vaxxer.
John Winchester, I hate you so much.
John Winchester, go fucking
You know what?
rot in hell.
I hate
you did.
I do hate canon John Winchester, but I hate the John Winchester that I've conceptualized in my mind even more.
It's like, how can I hate him more? Let me think about it.
Let me work on it. What also I love about this scene is Dean is talking to the sheriff, basically explaining like, yeah, we saw this guy. He was crazy. He attacked my brother. And then he just ran away. So your problem should probably be over. No, and the parent, the sheriff is like, you know, you guys should really, and Dean's like, I know, we're leaving town. And I'm like, how is the sheriff going to be like, this must be your guys' fault? Like,
I also, big
stupid.
shout out to the Supernatural wiki. I don't know if this was the part of in the press release, because they said that some parts of this are from a press release. The quote is, Sam is getting his arm tended by paramedics while Dean spins a yarn to the sheriff.
So true.
He's totally spinning a yarn.
Yeah.
Lori thanks Sam, and you're like, oh my god, thank you for saving me. Sorry we like made out a little bit. Dean is in the Impala and watching and being like, I love my straight brother.
Oh, I know. And also, okay, Dean does make this face where I'm like, what is he thinking? I would love to know what is going on in his little head. Because and then Sam gets in the car and Dean is like, you know, we could stay here. Because I'm like, Dean does just very much love his little brother and just wants him to have like a normal life, which is so sad considering the revelations of last episode. Like, he really just does want Sam to have a good life.
I mean, he does in a way.
We can't keep going there.
Doing this. Yeah, and he's like, do you want to stay here? And then like Sam, like in an emo way, like looks out the window and is like, no, we can go. We can't stay. And then they like ride off into the sunset, and you're just like, here's a mousket tool we'll use for later.
But even so, I believe it's in this episode where Sam is like, you know, even when I was in college, like I didn't really fit in. And Dean's like, well, don't worry, I'm weird too, so we can both be weird together. And I'm like, oh
my god, do you want to hear a trivia fact about this episode?
Of course.
Trivia from the wiki. When Dean is burning the preacher's remains, the classic Star Wars blaster sound effect can be heard as the remains begin to burn.
Now, why would they do that?
They're just stealing the Lucasfilm intellectual property.
But also, like, I didn't notice that. That's such a weird thing to put in there. Like, why?
Supernatural. I can't say I'm surprised. I
also like the other fact on the trivia on this wiki page. The CAW's official summary mistakenly calls Hookman a vengeful spirit, when in fact, he is a violent spirit. So true.
There's some interesting cultural references in here as well. Eastern Iowa University is a fictional location created by sci-fi author Stephen Barry. This is the first episode to feature the brothers successfully salting and burning a ghost's bones. In previous episodes, their remains were unavailable, forcing them to use alternate methods.
Yeah, okay, this is also the episode where Dean does make references to the Andy Griffith Show and to Ghostbusters.
Yes.
And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Who is the target audience for this show? This was coming out on the CW. Like, there are not like people who appreciate those references are not watching this show.
Here's a fun fact of TV history for you guys. Supernatural was one of the first shows, and it was one of the only ones that came from the WB to the transfer over to the CW. And this was a part of the whole thing of when, much like happened on a couple other networks like Fox, where they had a channel that was flagging in viewership and in advertiser dollars. So they made a lot of television shows for Black viewers and with starring Black characters. and that got really popular. And then as soon as they got popular and then it made the network profitable again, they started replacing them with white shows. And that's like a part of the history of the WB that eventually becomes the CW. And Supernatural is like one of the first overall white shows that persists like from the transition time. And that's just a fun and horrible thing about the history of television. So when people are like, oh, what's the audience? The audience is they were trying to get white audiences back in any way, shape, or form. And they didn't know what fucking age demographic. They didn't understand until they got to the CW. Oh, we want teens, I guess, was the vibe. But when they brought over Supernatural was like not exactly for teen. Like they hadn't hit the bullseye yet. So it was roaming around to find white viewers, basically. So the history of television is horrible.
They definitely hit every single trope. They were like, what do white people like?
Literally.
Like now that I have that in mind, looking
classic
at the show,
cars, guns,
music that no one cares about. That's not true, but still. Violence against women.
Guns, that should get people to watch, and then the people who watched were like gay teenagers instead.
Yeah,
and they really fucked that one up.
Yeah, so, good job, guys.
Good job.
The main fan base of your show is a bunch of gay teenagers who are projecting onto your big macho man. So good job, Eric Kripke. Good job, CW.
Thanks for listening, and thanks for staying with us through our hiatus. If you want more unfortunate content about Supernatural, you can follow us on social media at Mystery Throtcast on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Make sure you rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podchaser, and Overcast. If you want to hear more from us, both of us are also co-hosts on RuPaul's Pod Race, which is our queer Star Wars podcast, also available wherever you get podcasts. See you next Tuesday for more slaying people, queer baiting things, the supernatural business.